Welcome to Three Tiny Questions. Three Tiny Questions with Paul Lavoie, co-founder of the great agency Taxi. Yo, Taxi! I'm going down to Hudson and Morton Street.
Welcome to Three Tiny Questions, the podcast where we, three tiny partners, ask the leading minds in marketing one question each about brands, trends, culture, or whatever else comes to mind in an effort to make the world of advertising a tiny bit better. I'm Mike Rovner, partner at Tiny, an ad agency devoted to making great work with great people, having a great time doing it. And with me, as always, are my sweet, sweet tiny partners, Tom Chrisman and Michael Stupak. Say hi, you sweet tiny darlings.
Bonjour.
Hello.
On today's episode of Three Tiny Questions, we are joined by my good friend and Canadian doppelganger, Paul Lavoie, not Lavoie, Lavoie. Paul is the founder of Taxi, Strategy Magazine's Canadian agency of the decade. He sold it to WPP in 2010, and just last month, it was announced that VML is merging Taxi and Wunderman Thompson Canada to create VML Canada. But there will still be a Taxi Montreal and a Taxi New York, which is where I worked, which can never die. Today, Paul is the founder of Beau Lake, makers of luxury boats, paddle boats, and accessories for everyone who loves dipping their toes in a lake. He is the recipient of 7 lifetime awards in the advertising industry, an investor, an advisor, and a film director. Bienvenue, Paul Lavoie.
Bonjour, Tom. Comment ça va?
Oh,
muy bien,
nice
y tú.
Let's light this candle, Paul. So why don't you regale our audience with a tale of your career and how you find yourself about to answer 3 tiny questions?
Yeah, how'd you get here, Paul?
How did I get here? Well, I took a taxi. I was thinking about that, my early inspirations, because, there's school, there's education, but there's always people or events in your career that sort of form and groom it, of sort. And I was thinking that really everything I became as a designer and an art director, creative director, all came and was sort of groomed before I was 16 years old. And let me explain. My mom and dad were great storytellers. So around the table, we'd have these great stories, and storytelling is such a great part of our of what we do. The other thing is they gave us. I was really lucky on this one. Won the lottery. They gave my siblings and I a lot of confidence. Let me explain. When I was very young, I used to draw, and they used to say things like, you can't throw those drawings away. They're going to be worth $1 million, and I believe. And I felt confident. I felt they gave me some sort of little ticket, a coupon, that I believed in myself. And when you get into this business, and you guys know this very well, especially at that early part, it's very competitive, and you're full of rejection. And I think that little dose of special sauce confidence really helped me get into the business. So I always thank them for that. And then something weird happened when I was like 10. My father worked for International Harvester. It's a farm machinery company. They manufactured and sold things. It's called Navistar now, but it was huge in North America. And Raymond Loewy, I don't know if you know that guy, but he was a very famous designer. He designed the Coke bottle, Shell, and he also designed boats and planes and things like that. He was an industrial and graphic designer. And he was recognized as pretty much shaping your country in the 20th century. And it's, Raymond Loewy, very famous guy, born in Paris, he studied in the US and worked there. And he did a lot of important things. And he had designed the International Harvester logo. It was a little I, lowercase, and it was a cap H. I don't know if you remember it. I want to post it later. And my older brother one day, we had a lot of swag around the house. So my brother walked in with a hat with the IH, my older brother, Bob. And he said, what do you see there, Paul? And I said, I see an I and an H. He goes, well, look again. And I looked and I went, holy. It was a tractor. It was a guy on a tractor. I was so blown away. And I learned that lesson in design later on. And it really kind of influenced my early career as a designer. In fact, I didn't do annual reports. I did that. I did word marks and identity and logos and things like that. And I always remember the lesson that I learned there was the minimum amount of strokes with the biggest impact. And I was always thinking about that, even in ads, in the advertising TV stuff I did. So that was really an important event that was in childhood. But in high school, in a funny way, all the extracurricular activities I did really kind of formed me. I did cartoons, I designed the yearbook. I was the editor of the school newspaper. That's like being a creative director, what's in, what's out. I was in theater. I was on stage, boardroom skills. I started a little company, a radio station with my buddy Gordon. And that was kind of an entrepreneurship thing. So, I did all this stuff. And then I was very competitively playing hockey and basketball. So if you take that cocktail, competitiveness, skills, entrepreneurial skills, all the things you need, art direction, design, decision-making, thought process, and you put it in a cocktail, this is exactly the nucleus of what I did. Of course, I went to art school after, and I studied craft and stuff like that, and went through a more traditional route, which was as important. And I think the two people in art college that really inspired me were actually Milton Glaser and George Lois. Milton Glaser, George Lois, they taught me great things that were not just their style, but Milton Glaser was always about strategy and why he was doing things. And George Lois, what I loved about him more than anyone was his problem-solving ideas. He would, do an ad campaign that would be classified ads. He launched huge brands with unorthodox media, basically. And that really influenced the stuff I did in my career. So the early influences really kind of, like I said, grew me for, becoming what I am today, or was.
Sing the question one thing, Robner. Do it.
Oh, it's going to go something like this. It's time for question one.
It's time for question one.
All right. Well, I get the first question because, I'm Paul. You've had a lot of clients over the years. Who
Yep.
was the best CMO you ever worked with, and what made them great?
I had a lot of shitty clients as well. I mean, let's
Of
universe
course.
and all.
I'm assuming that.
Clients really could drive you crazy, but there were exceptionally great clients, and they were good clients. The great clients, the first one that comes to mind is Rob Gannett, who happens to be the CEO of Taxi / VML, whatever you want to call it today.
Mhm.
He was extremely inspiring. He was clear on the objectives without meddling on how to get there. So he was very, very curious, and he knew who the top directors were. He knew his shit, basically, but he was transparent. He was open-minded. We created a trust, and then we did fabulous work. And why I know he was a great client, it wasn't because I had that relationship. He was doing great work at Ogilvy. He was getting great shit out of JWT and Rethink and Taxi. And so there was a consistency to his method, clarity, articulate brief. This is what I am looking for. Not being, this is what we're looking for, very clear, and motivating us.
So it's time, but I think it's time for question number two.
It's time for question two.
I think it is time for question two. And this one is near and dear to our hearts. Paul, the agency you founded, Taxi, had a great reputation, made great work, employed some really great people, had a fantastic run as an independent agency. What drove you to start an agency in the first place?
I was working as creative director at the largest agency in Canada at the time. They did some really good work, but they did a lot of crap too. But, it was called Cassette. And the problem I had with Cassette, large groups working together. So you have 1,000 people, you have these silos of people, and you have these ghettos. And I found it very dysfunctional. Great ideas got lost through this maze. We hadn't even met the client, and things couldn't get out the door. We were slower, more people around the table with more opinion and all that bullshit. And then all of a sudden, we have this pitch, and you're thrown in a room with 4 people, and it's very collaborative. There was no ego. We're in it. It was very competitive. We'd win the business. Say we win the business, we'd all go back to our silos.
Right.
So what I thought would work better is if we recreated that pitch idea of putting smaller groups, don't make ghettos, mix it all up. And like you can only get 4 people in a taxi unless you're driving in India, which is a different thing. Think about it at that time. So this structure was very, very important for me. The other thing I was reading at the time was a guy called Robin Dunbar. He's an anthropologist from London, and he had come up with this white paper on dysfunction in society and stuff like that. He had a magic number of 159. Actually, it was 149.63, but that's a half a person. So let's just say 150 people, and he studied Roman military, American military, British military, African tribes. Like, for instance, in your army, they'll never send a unit out that has more than 150 people because it's dysfunctional. The relationships break down. You can't communicate quick enough. So I thought that would be a great idea. And in fact, when we did reach 150 people in our first office in Toronto, we opened up across the street called Taxi 2. So it was a redundancy of jobs, but it bonded the idea of what taxi was about, which is a great story internally, and also it was very effective. So that was thing. So structure, in a funny way, was something that I thought about because I had a problem and wanted to fix that. But the other bigger idea was blending design and advertising. So I started Taxi with my partner Jane, who is still with me today, my life partner. But she was an art director who wanted to get into design. I was the designer who moved into art direction. And so together we were able to create a different kind of advertising that kind of touched on more of the consumer touch points of things. So for instance, TV commercials were not always, I thought, the solution. Maybe the packaging had to be changed, or maybe in-store user experience or things like that. Going back to George Lois, who's trying to be a little bit more creative on solving problems and not going to always the traditional route. So at the time in 1992 was a recession. And so all my buddies were saying, Paul, this is the stupidest thing in the world to start an agency. Why start now? And I thought, it's the best time to start, because when everything is going well, clients are not looking for new solutions. They're probably playing golf. But when there's a recession, there's issues, there's problems. And basically, that's one of the things we do best is we solve problems. We solve business problems. And we solve it in our craft and within our knowledge and with our experience with the customer-consumer relationships and creating that kind of mix. So clients were receptive to get my call. Like, how's business? Well, I have a new idea. And I did have a new idea. It's funny that I should say that today because it has changed so much. But back then, believe it or not putting your name moniker on the door was a huge thing. And so anything that was different. And the other thing I liked about not putting like Hope Lavoie up there, it really was a team effort, as you know. And this took the ego away and focused on ideas. And that's when we really hit it out of the park. We got the business results. We broke the category and won the prize. We all went home.
Super story. Super.
That's great. And it's motivating to us, especially. Which leads me to my tiny question and your third tiny question.
It's time for question 3. Wee-hee!
Wonderful answers. My question for you, Paul Lavoie, is what's the best and worst thing about leaving the ad industry, which you didn't just, influence, you kind of kicked the door down of the industry and then you just left us?
I really detested the idea of pitching. I think it was the worst rape of gray matter that ever happened in any industry. You know, when you're a legal firm, you're not going to do the whole case and get Trump. Trump's going to pay. They're not going to go in. Trump's not going to say, "Well, how did I get out of this fucking mess?" Well, let me show you. We could go that route, go this route, and we'll ask like 12 firms. Same with accounting. For some reason, in advertising agency world, we have to spill all this gray matter, waste all this time, when we could easily make a clear decision based on, is this the right chemistry fit? Who's actually going to be working on my business? Don't show me work that has been done years ago. Show me the team. Bring him in the room. Let me get excited. But don't go ahead and solve my problem. But what I do miss is the people. I mean, not just the people that worked at Taxi and Cassette and Thompson, where I worked. I met amazing people, but competitors, incredible people who we get to meet when we're judging at Cannes or whatever, and from different countries and different perspectives, all with similar frustrations and so on. And so you meet all these amazing agencies, but what does that do? It ups your game, and it was so much fun.
All right, so I'm gonna wrap it up here. Cela a été trois petites questions avec Monsieur Paul Lavoie. I have the best.
Bonjour, mes amis. Bonsoir, bonjour.
Merci beaucoup, mon ami.
Catherine Deneuve, Champs-Élysées, une de toi.
Thank you so much for coming and indulging us our three tiny questions.
We are your hosts, the tiny team of Tom Christman, Mike Rovner, and myself, Michael Stupak. You can check out our agency at tinyatagency.com and see how we provoke big belly laughs and bigger thoughts on our LinkedIns. And tune in next time for more Three Tiny Questions. And send us your biggest marketing questions in our feed, and you could be featured here. Stay tiny, everyone.
Stay tiny.